My name is Eleanor, and 6 months ago, I moved with my 9-year-old daughter Lily to a small coastal town called Harborview for a fresh start after my divorce. Everything was perfect until last Tuesday when Lily ran home from school in tears, terrified because her teacher and classmates had told her I had died in a car accident 2 years ago. They showed her newspaper clippings, memorial photos, even my obituary, with my exact name, birth date, and face. When I went to the school to clear up this cruel prank, I discovered something impossible. According to everyone in town, I did die 2 years ago. They stared at me like they'd seen a ghost. As I investigated this bizarre case of mistaken identity, I uncovered a web of secrets about a powerful family desperate to hide the truth. A truth that would not only change my understanding of who I am, but reveal why I was drawn to this town in the first place. What began as a terrifying case of mistaken identity became the key to unlocking a mystery I never knew existed about my own life. If you've ever felt that strange sensation that there's more to your life than what you've been told, unexplained memories, coincidences too perfect to be random, or connections to places you've never been, you're not alone. On this channel, I share real stories of ordinary people who discovered extraordinary truths about themselves and the world around them. Subscribe now and turn on notifications to join our community of truth seekers and never miss a story that might help you make sense of the inexplicable moments in your own life. Some mysteries aren't meant to stay buried forever. My name is Eleanor Mitchell, and I'm 47 years old. I'm sitting here in my kitchen looking out at the harbor as the evening light turns the water to gold. 6 months ago, when I first saw this view, I thought I had finally found peace after years of chaos. Now I know that my arrival in this town wasn't the end of a journey, but the beginning of one. A journey into a mystery I never knew existed, one that would ultimately change everything I understood about myself, my past, and my place in the world. It all started 4 months ago, on an ordinary Tuesday in October. The morning had been like any other since Lily and I moved to Harborview in April. I made breakfast while Lily, my 9-year-old daughter, packed her school bag and chattered about the science project she was working on with her new friends. We had fallen into comfortable routines in this small coastal town, healing slowly from the turbulence of my divorce from David the previous year. The move had been my decision, a clean break, a fresh start in a place where the constant reminders of my failed marriage wouldn't surround us. I had researched dozens of small towns before choosing Harborview, drawn to its excellent school system, affordable housing market, and the inexplicable feeling of familiarity I experienced when I first saw photos of its picturesque harbor in Main Street. I feel like I've been here before, I had told the real estate agent during our first visit. She had smiled politely. A lot of people say that. Harborview has that classic New England charm that feels like home, even to first-time visitors. I accepted her explanation, even though the sensation had been stronger than simple déjà vu, more like a memory just beyond my reach, a word on the tip of my tongue that I couldn't quite grasp. But in the months since we'd moved in, that feeling had faded as we built our new life. Lily making friends at school, me establishing my freelance graphic design business with local clients, both of us feeling increasingly at home in this community of about 12,000 people. That Tuesday, I kissed Lily goodbye at 8:15, watched her walk down our tree-lined street toward Harborview Elementary 6 blocks away, then settled into my home office to work on a branding package for a new bakery opening downtown. At 2:30, I took a break to prepare an after-school snack for Lily, who would be home by 3 o'clock. But at 2:47, the front door burst open with a bang that made me jump. Lily flew into the house, her face streaked with tears, her body trembling so violently that she could barely stand. I rushed to her, kneeling to gather her in my arms, my mind racing through terrible possibilities: bullying, an accident, some kind of assault. "Lily, what happened? Are you hurt?" She clung to me with desperate strength, her small fingers digging into my shoulders as if she feared I might disappear. Her breathing came in ragged gasps between sobs. They said, she couldn't get the words out, her body heaving with each attempted sentence. "Breathe, baby," I said, keeping my voice calm despite my mounting panic. "Just breathe. I'm right here." After several moments, she pulled back enough to look at my face, her blue eyes wide with a fear so profound it chilled me. They said you died, Mom. They said you died 2 years ago." I blinked, trying to process what seemed like nonsense. "What? Who said that?" "Everyone." The word burst from her like an explosion. "Miss Richards and Zoe and Principal Mercer and they had pictures, Mom, pictures of you, and a newspaper that said you died in a car crash on Route 27, and they had a picture of your grave, and they said I was crazy because you couldn't be my mom because you were dead." My first thought was that this was some incomprehensibly cruel prank, one that had terrified my already emotionally vulnerable daughter. A flare of protective rage shot through me. "Listen to me," I said, holding her tear-stained face between my palms. "I am very much alive. Obviously, someone is playing a horrible joke, and we're going to get to the bottom of it right now." I helped Lily to the couch, brought her a glass of water, and called the school. The secretary who answered seemed flustered when I identified myself. "Mrs. Mitchell? Eleanor Mitchell?" "Yes, this is Eleanor Mitchell, Lily's mother. I need to speak with Principal Mercer immediately about what happened today." I'll see if he's available." Her voice sounded strange, almost frightened. After a long hold, Principal Mercer came on the line. His normally friendly, confident tone was replaced by something cautious, strained.
"Miss Mitchell, this is Thomas Mercer." "Mr. Mercer, my daughter just came home completely traumatized because apparently the entire school, including you and her teacher, told her that I died 2 years ago. I don't know what kind of sick joke this is." "Miss Mitchell," he interrupted, his voice lowering, "I think it would be best if you came to the school to discuss this in person, immediately. I'm not leaving my daughter alone after what just happened. Bring her with you, please. This is a situation that requires direct conversation." Something in his tone stopped my angry retort. This wasn't the response I expected from someone caught perpetrating a cruel prank. There was genuine confusion in his voice, perhaps even fear. "We'll be there in 15 minutes, I said finally, and hung up. Lily didn't want to return to the school, but I convinced her that the only way to clear this up was to confront it directly. As we walked the 6 blocks back to Harborview Elementary, I tried to imagine a reasonable explanation for what had happened. Perhaps there was another Eleanor Mitchell who had died, creating a case of mistaken identity. Perhaps this was a bizarre teaching exercise about grief that had gone horribly wrong. What I couldn't know then was that I was walking toward a revelation that would shatter the foundations of everything I believed about my life. The school was mostly empty by then, the majority of students having gone home for the day. The few parents and children still lingering in the hallways fell silent as Lily and I passed, their expressions a disturbing mixture of shock, confusion, and in some cases fear. A mother I recognized from PTA meetings actually took a step back, pulling her son behind her as if to protect him from me. Principal Mercer was waiting in his office with Miss Richards, Lily's 4th-grade teacher. Both stood as we entered, their faces pale. Miss Richards actually gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "It's true," she whispered. "Oh my God." "What's true?" I demanded, keeping Lily close to my side. "What exactly is going on here?" Principal Mercer gestured to the chairs across from his desk. "Please, sit down, Miss Mitchell. This is an unusual situation." That's putting it mildly, I said, but I took a seat, pulling Lily onto my lap rather than having her sit in the chair beside me. She was still trembling slightly, and I wanted her to feel my solid, very much alive presence. Miss Mitchell, Principal Mercer began, then faltered, seemingly unsure how to continue. This is difficult to explain. You see, there was indeed an Eleanor Mitchell who lived in Harborview. That is, well, she died 2 years ago in a car accident on Route 27, just outside town. That's obviously a different Eleanor Mitchell, I said firmly. It's not an uncommon name. Miss Richards shook her head. No, you don't understand. It wasn't just someone with the same name. She slid a folder across the desk toward me. This is what upset the children today. Zoe brought in a memorial program from her mother's files for their family history project. When she showed the class, Lily became upset because I opened the folder and felt the blood drain from my face. Staring back at me from the memorial program was my own face. Not someone who looked similar, but me, unmistakably me, though with a slightly different hairstyle than I currently wore. The program listed Eleanor Ann Mitchell, born April 17, 1978, my exact birth date, died August 23, 2023. Beside the program was a newspaper clipping from the Harborview Gazette reporting the tragic death of local artist Eleanor Mitchell, 45, in a single car accident on Route 27. The article mentioned that she was survived by her mother, Catherine Mitchell, and that she had been a beloved member of the community since moving to Harborview in 2020. I couldn't find words to continue. This wasn't merely a case of mistaken identity. The woman who had died had my exact name, my exact birth date, and my face. Mom, Lily's voice was small, frightened. Why do they have pictures of you? I pulled myself together for her sake. It's someone who looks very much like me, sweetheart. A strange coincidence. But even as I said the words, I knew they couldn't be true. The resemblance was too perfect, the details too exact. A cold sensation spread through my body, a primal fear response to something that challenged the very nature of reality as I understood it. Principal Mercer leaned forward. Miss Mitchell, I don't know how to explain this. Everyone in this town who knew Eleanor, the Eleanor who died, is certain that you are her, the same person, which is, of course, impossible. Of course it's impossible, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. I didn't die. I've never even been to Harborview before we moved here in April. Miss Richards and Principal Mercer exchanged a look that sent another chill through me. What? I demanded. It's just, the Eleanor Mitchell who died was also an artist, a painter, primarily. She lived at 1487 Ocean View Road. My address, my current address. This is insane, I whispered. I'm a graphic designer, not a painter. I moved here from Boston after my divorce. I have a complete life history that doesn't involve living in Harborview before this year. I have a daughter, which apparently the other Eleanor Mitchell didn't. No, Miss Richards confirmed. She lived alone. She never married, never had children. Lily shifted on my lap. Mom, I'm scared. I hugged her close. It's okay, baby. We're going to figure this out. I looked back at the two educators. This has to be some kind of elaborate mistake. Birth records, driver's licenses, social security numbers, these things can prove who I am, that I'm not this other Eleanor Mitchell. We'd like to help you resolve this, Principal Mercer said carefully, for Lily's sake and for the sake of the other students who are understandably confused. Would you be willing to meet with some people who knew Eleanor well? Perhaps they could help clarify the situation? I hesitated, then nodded. What choice did I have? This bizarre case of mistaken identity, if that's what it was, had already traumatized my daughter. We needed to clear it up quickly and definitively. Fine, when? Would tomorrow evening work? I can arrange for Catherine Mitchell, Eleanor's mother, and perhaps 1 or 2 others to meet with you. Eleanor's mother? A woman who supposedly shared my mother's name, though my own mother had died of cancer when I was in college, long before Lily was born.
Tomorrow at 7, I agreed, but not here, at my home. If this was some kind of elaborate scam or prank, I wanted it to occur on my territory, where I felt safe and in control. We left the school in silence, Lily clinging to my hand. As we walked home, I noticed people on the street doing double takes as we passed. An elderly man actually crossed himself. A woman dropped her shopping bag, oranges rolling across the sidewalk as she stared at me in shock. Harborview was a small town. Everyone, it seemed, had known the Eleanor Mitchell who died, and everyone thought I was her. That evening, after I'd made Lily's favorite dinner and tucked her into bed with extra stories and reassurances, I sat down at my computer and began to research. First, I looked up the news reports of the accident that had killed the other Eleanor Mitchell. They were exactly as described: a single-car accident on a rainy night, the driver losing control on a notoriously dangerous curve of Route 27. The car had gone off the road and down a steep embankment, bursting into flames. The driver, Eleanor, had been pronounced dead at the scene. Then I searched for information about Eleanor Mitchell, the artist. Her work was good, better than good, actually. Haunting seascapes, intimate portraits, abstract compositions that somehow managed to convey complex emotions through color and form. She had shown in several respected galleries in Boston and had been building a significant reputation in the New England art scene. But it was when I found a more detailed biography on a gallery website that the true strangeness of the situation hit me. Eleanor Ann Mitchell, born in Worcester, Massachusetts. Parents, Catherine and Robert Mitchell, studied at Massachusetts College of Art and Design. These weren't just similar details to my own life, they were identical. Worcester was my hometown. Catherine and Robert were my parents' names. I had studied graphic design at MassArt. With shaking hands, I pulled up photos of the artist at various gallery openings. In every one, I saw my own face looking back at me. Not a resemblance, not a doppelganger, but me, with the same small scar near my right eyebrow from a childhood biking accident, the same slightly asymmetrical smile, even the same tendency to stand with my weight shifted to one hip. I sat back, my mind reeling. This wasn't possible. People didn't have exact duplicates living parallel lives in the same region, and they certainly didn't die and then show up 2 years later with a different career and a child who hadn't existed before. I tried to think rationally. There had to be a logical explanation. Identity theft? Some kind of elaborate fraud? But to what end? And how would that explain the reactions of the townspeople who clearly believed they were seeing a ghost? As I continued searching, I found myself on the website for Harborview Cemetery. With a sense of surreal detachment, I located the record for Eleanor Mitchell's burial, plot 342, Oak Section. Before I could reconsider, I grabbed my keys and a flashlight. Lily was sound asleep, and our next-door neighbor, Mrs. Abernathy, was always home. I knocked on her door, explained that I had an urgent errand, and asked if she could listen for Lily. She agreed, though she gave me a strange look, another person who had apparently known the other Eleanor. The cemetery was on the edge of town, a 15-minute drive from my house. It was nearly 10 p.m. when I arrived, the gates still open, but the grounds deserted. Armed with my flashlight and the plot information, I made my way through the silent rows of gravestones, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Oak Section was toward the back, newer than some other parts of the cemetery. I counted rows and plots, the beam of my flashlight jumping erratically as my hand trembled. And then I found it, plot 342. A simple headstone of gray granite. Eleanor Ann Mitchell, April 17, 1978, August 23, 2023. The beauty she created lives on. I stood there, staring at my own name, my own birth date, carved into stone. The world seemed to tilt around me, reality itself becoming unstable. I reached out and touched the cold granite, half expecting my hand to pass through it like a hallucination, but it was solid, real. It's unsettling, isn't it? The voice behind me nearly stopped my heart. I whirled around, raising my flashlight like a weapon.
A man stood there, tall, perhaps in his early 50s, with silver threading through his dark hair. He wore an expensive-looking coat against the October chill and regarded me with an expression I couldn't quite read in the dim light. "Who are you?" I demanded, taking a step back. "Alexander Blackwood," he said, staying where he was, as if recognizing my fear. "I'm Eleanor Mitchell," I said, the words feeling strange in my mouth as I stood before the grave bearing my name. "But not her. I can't be." He nodded slowly. "No, you can't be, because she's dead. I identified her body myself after the accident." A shiver ran through me that had nothing to do with the night air. "Then how do you explain this?" I gestured vaguely at myself. "I can't," he admitted, "not yet, but I'd very much like to try." He took a business card from his pocket and held it out to me. "I understand you're meeting with Catherine tomorrow evening. I'd like to be there, if you'll permit it." I hesitated, then took the card. In the beam of my flashlight, I could see it was simple but elegant. Alexander Blackwood, Blackwood Industries, with a phone number and email. Blackwood Industries? My family's company. We've been in Harborview for generations. He paused. Eleanor, the Eleanor I knew, was working on a commissioned series of paintings for our corporate headquarters when she died. I nodded, tucking the card into my pocket. "Fine. Tomorrow at 7, my house." "Thank you." He turned to go, then stopped. "One question, if I may. What made you choose Harborview? Of all the places you could have moved after your divorce, why here?" The question caught me off guard with its accuracy. "How do you know about my divorce?" "I make it my business to know things," he said simply, "especially when those things involve someone who looks exactly like a dead woman I cared about deeply." I considered not answering, but something told me this man might be key to understanding what was happening. "I don't know why I chose Harborview," I admitted. "It felt familiar somehow. Right, like I was supposed to be here." Alexander Blackwood nodded, as if I had confirmed something he already suspected. "Good night, Eleanor. I'll see you tomorrow." As he walked away, his tall figure disappearing into the darkness between the gravestones, I was left with the unsettling feeling that he knew far more about my situation than he was saying. I returned home, checked on Lily, and spent a restless night alternating between fitful sleep and frantic research. By morning, I had found more parallels between my life and the deceased Eleanor's than differences. We had the same education, similar career paths, both in the arts, though I had pursued graphic design while she focused on painting, and even similar tastes, judging from the descriptions of her home in a local magazine feature written a year before her death. The primary differences appeared to be that she had never married or had children, while I had been married to David for 10 years before our divorce and had Lily. And, of course, the rather significant difference that she had died 2 years ago while I was very much alive. I kept Lily home from school that day, unwilling to subject her to more confusion and potential trauma. We spent the day baking cookies and watching movies, deliberately normal activities that helped calm her fears. I told her that we would be having visitors that evening who would help clear up the misunderstanding and that everything would be fine. I wish I had believed that myself. At precisely 7 p.m., the doorbell rang. I opened it to find 3 people on my porch. Alexander Blackwood from the cemetery, an elderly woman with a shock of white hair and piercing blue eyes that immediately reminded me of my mother, and a petite woman approximately my age with a tablet computer clutched in her hands. "Eleanor," Alexander said with a slight nod, "thank you for allowing us to come. This is Catherine Mitchell and Dr. Sarah Jenkins." "Please come in," I said, stepping back to allow them entry. Catherine Mitchell moved slowly, her eyes never leaving my face. The resemblance to my own mother was uncanny, though my mother had been dead for over 20 years. "Where's the child?" she asked without preamble, her voice stronger than her fragile appearance suggested. "Lily is in her room," I answered. I thought it best for us to talk privately first. "Wise," murmured. This conversation may not be suitable for a 9-year-old. The fact that he knew Lily's exact age without being told sent another chill through me. I led them to the living room, where I had set out coffee and the cookies Lily and I had baked that afternoon. No one touched either. "Let me be direct," I said as we sat down. "I understand there was a woman named Eleanor Mitchell who lived in this town, in this very house, and who died 2 years ago. I understand that I look exactly like her, share her birth date and many details of her history. What I don't understand is how this is possible, or why everyone seems to think I am her, returned from the dead." Catherine Mitchell leaned forward, those familiar blue eyes boring into mine. "Tell me about your parents." The question surprised me. Robert and Catherine Mitchell, both deceased. My father died of a heart attack when I was in high school. My mother died of breast cancer during my sophomore year of college. Catherine nodded slowly. "And where did you grow up?" "Worcester, Massachusetts." "And after your mother died?" "I stayed at MassArt, finished my degree in graphic design, got a job at a Boston agency, met David, got married, had Lily, got divorced last year, and decided to make a fresh start and a new place." Catherine exchanged glances with Alexander. "It's exactly as we thought," she said softly. "What is?" I demanded. "What's going on here?" Dr. Jenkins, who had been silent until now, placed her tablet on the coffee table. "Miss Mitchell, what I'm about to show you will be difficult to process, but I believe it's the only way to help you understand your situation." She tapped the screen, bringing up what appeared to be medical records. "These are the DNA results from Eleanor Mitchell's remains after the accident. We've compared them to a sample we obtained from your home, a hair from your hairbrush."
Under normal circumstances, I would have been outraged at this invasion of privacy, but nothing about this situation was normal. "The DNA is identical," Dr. Jenkins continued, "not similar, not related, identical, which is, scientifically speaking, impossible for two different people." "I don't understand," I said, though a terrible suspicion was beginning to form in my mind. Alexander leaned forward. "Eleanor, what's the earliest memory you have of Lily? Not her birth, but something specific, a detail." I thought about it. Her 3rd birthday party. She smeared chocolate cake all over her face, and David took a photo that we used for our Christmas card that year. "And your wedding to David?" I described the small ceremony in a Boston garden, the specific flowers in my bouquet, the way it had started to rain just as we said our vows. "What about your mother's funeral?" This question, from Catherine, struck me as particularly painful, but I answered anyway, describing the small church, the specific hymns, the unexpected snowfall that had blanketed the cemetery in white. After each answer, the 3 visitors exchanged glances loaded with meaning I couldn't decipher. Finally, Alexander spoke again. "Eleanor, I want you to try something. Close your eyes and think about your childhood home in Worcester. Picture the house, your bedroom. Can you describe it?" I closed my eyes, summoning the image. White 2-story with black shutters, my bedroom was on the 2nd floor, overlooking the backyard. Yellow wallpaper with small flowers, a window seat where I used to read. "And the address?" Catherine asked, her voice tight with some emotion I couldn't identify. 147 Maple Street. When I opened my eyes, Catherine was crying silently, tears tracking down her lined face. "That's exactly right," she whispered. "That was our house, my house, with Robert and our daughter Eleanor." "I don't understand," I repeated, a sense of dread building within me. "Are you saying I am that Eleanor, the one who died? Because that's impossible. I have a complete life history. I have a daughter." Dr. Jenkins cleared her throat. "Ms. Mitchell, are you familiar with the concept of false memory syndrome, or confabulation?" "You think I'm delusional, that I've invented my entire life?" "Not exactly," Alexander interjected. "We believe your memories of your childhood and early adulthood are real. They match perfectly with the Eleanor who died. It's your memories of marriage, motherhood, and the years leading up to your arrival in Harborview that we question." "That's absurd," I said.
anger rising to displace my fear. I have photos of Lily as a baby, of our life in Boston. I have legal documents, marriage certificate, divorce papers, Lily's birth certificate. May we see them? Dr. Jenkins asked quietly. Of course. I went to my office and returned with a file box containing our important documents. I spread them on the coffee table. Lily's birth certificate, showing she was born in Boston General Hospital 9 years ago, to Elamar and David Mitchell. My marriage license, tax returns filed jointly with David, school records from Lily's previous school in Boston, photos of the three of us throughout the years. Catherine picked up a family photo from a beach vacation when Lily was about 5. This man, David, he's your ex-husband? Yes. And where is he now? In Boston. He's a corporate attorney. We share custody of Lily, but she lives primarily with me. He has her every other weekend and for part of the summer. Alexander was examining my divorce papers with a frown. The law firm listed here doesn't exist, he said, at least not in Boston. That's ridiculous. Of course it exists. Jenkins, Blackwood, and Mercer. As soon as the words left my mouth, I realized the names matched those of the 3 people involved in yesterday's revelation: Dr. Jenkins, Alexander Blackwood, and Principal Mercer. Alexander's eyebrows rose. Quite a coincidence. But it wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. Something else was happening here, something beyond my comprehension. Catherine was still staring at the photo. And you say this man, David, is in Boston now? When did you last speak with him? I had to think about it. Last week, about Lily's weekend visit. Could you call him now? Alexander suggested. On speaker, if you don't mind. Part of me wanted to refuse, to throw these strangers out of my house and end this increasingly disturbing conversation. But a deeper part needed answers, needed to understand what was happening to me and my daughter. I took out my phone and dialed David's number, putting it on speaker as requested. The number you have dialed is not in service. Please check the number and dial again. I frowned and tried again, with the same result. That's impossible. I just spoke with him last week. Dr. Jenkins' expression was one of professional sympathy, the kind doctors reserve for delivering bad news. Ms. Mitchell, we've done extensive research since you appeared in Harborview 2 months ago. 6 months ago, I corrected automatically. She shook her head. 2 months. You and Lily arrived on August 27th of this year. No, we moved here in April. We've been here 6 months. Dr. Jenkins continued as if I hadn't spoken. In that time, we've been unable to verify the existence of David Mitchell as you've described him. The law firm doesn't exist. The address you provided for him in Boston belongs to a parking garage. His phone number, as you've just discovered, isn't in service. This is crazy, I whispered, but doubt was beginning to creep in. If what they were saying was true, if David didn't exist, then what about Lily? What about my life for the past decade? As if reading my thoughts, Catherine spoke again, her voice gentle now. Eleanor, we don't know exactly what's happening here, but we have a theory. The Eleanor Mitchell who died, my daughter, never married, never had a child. She lived alone, dedicated to her art. The life you remember with David and Lily, we believe it may be a constructed reality, a confabulation your mind created to protect itself from trauma.
What trauma? I demanded. The trauma of dying? Because that doesn't make any sense. I'm sitting right here, alive. Alexander leaned forward, his expression intense. 2 years ago, Eleanor Mitchell drove off Route 27 and died in the resulting crash. 2 months ago, you appeared in Harborview with a child, claiming to be recently divorced and looking for a fresh start. You purchased Eleanor's former home, which had stood empty since her death, using funds from an account that didn't exist before August of this year. You established yourself as a graphic designer despite having no portfolio or client history beyond 2 months ago. And you have memories of a life that we can find no evidence ever existed. So what are you suggesting? My voice had risen, fear making it sharp. That I'm some kind of ghost? A zombie? A clone? We don't know, Dr. Jenkins admitted, but we need to find out. For your sake, for Lily's sake, and for the sake of this community that's been thrown into turmoil by your appearance. At that moment, a small voice came from the hallway. "Mom?" Lily stood there in her pajamas, her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest, her eyes wide as she took in the 3 strangers in our living room. "Lily," I said, forcing a smile, "I thought you were reading in your room." I heard voices, her gaze fixed on Catherine. "Who are these people?" Catherine was staring at Lily with an expression of wonder and confusion. "Hello, Lily," she said softly. "My name is Catherine. I was Eleanor's mother." Lily's brow furrowed. "But my mom's name is Eleanor." "Yes," Catherine agreed. "Yes, it is." Alexander stood up. "We should continue this conversation another time, when Lily isn't present." I nodded, relieved for the reprieve. "Yes, I think that would be best." As they prepared to leave, Alexander handed me another business card. "My personal number is on the back. Call me anytime, day or night, if you need to talk. And Eleanor," he hesitated, "be careful. There are people in Harborview who are frightened by what's happening. Fear can make people dangerous." After they left, I tucked Lily back into bed, assuring her that everything was fine, that the visitors were just helping us clear up the confusion at school. But as I sat beside her bed, stroking her hair until she fell asleep, my mind was racing. If what they suggested was true, if my memories of marriage, divorce, and even motherhood were somehow false, then what was Lily? Who was she? She felt so undeniably real, so undeniably mine. The love I felt for her was the most real thing in my world. Yet I had to admit there were oddities I had dismissed or rationalized. David's increasing unavailability, always explained away by work commitments. The way Lily sometimes referred to events or places that didn't quite align with my own memories. The inexplicable gaps in our photo collection, gaps I had attributed to the chaos of moving. That night, after Lily was asleep, I went through our documents again, this time with a more critical eye. The birth certificate, which had always seemed so ordinary, now revealed peculiarities. The doctor's signature was illegible, the hospital name lacked an address, the official seal was blurred in a way that real documents rarely are. Our family photos, when examined closely, showed subtle inconsistencies, background details that changed between shots supposedly taken moments apart, lighting that didn't match the purported location, and David's face, always handsome, always smiling, had a certain generic quality to it, as if he had been assembled from central casting for attractive, successful husband. The more I looked, the more anomalies I found, until I was sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by the disintegrating evidence of a life I had believed was mine. But if that life wasn't real, then what was? And more urgently, what or who was Lily? I slept fitfully that night, torn between the rational explanation that I was being manipulated by Catherine, Alexander, and Dr. Jenkins for some unfathomable reason, and the increasingly undeniable possibility that something far stranger was happening, something that challenged the very nature of reality as I understood it. The next morning, I called the number on Alexander's card. "I need answers," I said when he answered on the second ring. "Real answers, not theories or speculation. Whatever is happening here affects not just me, but Lily. I need to know who she is, who I am, and what's really going on." "I understand," Alexander replied, his voice calm. "Are you free this afternoon? There's something I want to show you that might help explain things. You should bring Lily." I hesitated. "Why Lily?" "Because she's central to this situation in ways you don't yet understand. I promise, I mean neither of you any harm. Quite the opposite." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at 2 p.m. at an address he provided, the headquarters of Blackwood Industries on the outskirts of town. After I hung up, I sat with Lily at the kitchen table, watching her eat breakfast and trying to see her with fresh, objective eyes. She looked exactly as a 9-year-old daughter of mine should look, her hair the same chestnut brown as mine, her eyes a blue that matched my own, her nose and chin showing the slight Mitchell family pointedness that I had inherited from my father. But if what Catherine and the others suggested was true, if my memories of giving birth to her, raising her, loving her for 9 years were somehow false, then who was she really? A child actor hired for an elaborate deception? A figment of my imagination somehow made flesh? Neither explanation made sense, yet I had to consider them alongside even more outlandish possibilities.
Mom, you're staring, Lily said, looking up from her cereal with a small frown. Is something wrong? No, sweetheart. Just thinking about how much I love you. She rolled her eyes with the beginning of preteen attitude that had been emerging lately. You're being weird again. It's a mom's prerogative to be weird. I smiled, pushing aside my doubts. Whatever the truth was, my love for her felt real. That, at least, I could trust. We spent the morning quietly at home, though I noticed Lily watching me when she thought I wasn't looking, a concern in her eyes that no 9-year-old should have to feel. By 1:45, we were in the car heading toward Blackwood Industries. The building was impressive, a sleek, modern structure of glass and steel that stood in contrast to the quaint historical architecture of downtown Harborview. The lobby featured high ceilings, minimalist furniture, and large abstract paintings that I immediately recognized as the work of Eleanor Mitchell. The other Eleanor, the dead one. Alexander met us himself, emerging from an elevator with a warm smile for Lily. You must be Lily. I'm Alexander Blackwood. Your mother and I are old friends. Lily looked at me questioningly. I hadn't told her that Alexander had claimed to know the Eleanor who died. It's complicated. Mr. Blackwood is going to help us understand some things. Alexander led us to the elevator, which required his keycard and a fingerprint scan to access the top floor. As we rode up in silence, I noticed Lily gravitating closer to me, sensing the tension despite my attempts to appear calm. The elevator opened directly into what appeared to be Alexander's private office, a vast space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Harborview and the ocean beyond. One wall was covered with more of Eleanor's paintings, their vivid colors and emotional depth even more striking in this setting. Your work is beautiful, Alexander said, following my gaze to the paintings. Eleanor's work, I should say, though I suppose they're one and the same. I'm not a painter. I'm a graphic designer. He smiled slightly. You're sure about that? Before I could respond, he walked to his desk and pressed a button. A panel in the wall slid open, revealing a hidden room beyond. Please, he said, gesturing for us to enter. I hesitated, instinctively pulling Lily closer to my side. What is this? The answers you asked for, he said simply. I can tell you what I believe is happening, but it would be better to show you. Taking a deep breath, I nodded to Lily and we entered the hidden room together. It was a laboratory of some kind, filled with equipment I didn't recognize. Screens displayed complex data and what appeared to be medical imaging. In the center of the room was a chair that reminded me uncomfortably of something from a dentist's office, surrounded by more technical equipment. But what drew my attention immediately was the wall to our right. It was covered with photographs, documents, and handwritten notes connected with red string, like something from a detective show. In the center was a large photograph of Eleanor Mitchell, of me, taken at what appeared to be a gallery opening. Branching out from this central image were photographs of other women, all bearing a striking resemblance to me, though with subtle differences. Different hairstyles, different clothing styles, different settings, but all unmistakably versions of the same woman. What is this? I whispered, approaching the wall with growing dread. Evidence, Alexander said, coming to stand beside me. Evidence of something I've been tracking for nearly 30 years. Lily had moved to examine some of the photographs more closely. Mom,
They all look like you. Yes, Alexander agreed. They all look like your mother because, in a very real sense, they all are your mother. I turned to him sharply. What are you talking about? He gestured to the central photograph. This is Eleanor Mitchell, the Eleanor who died 2 years ago. She was a talented artist who moved to Harborview in 2020 after receiving a commission from Blackwood Industries. He pointed to another photograph showing a woman who could have been my twin, but dressed in what appeared to be 1990s fashion. This is Eleanor Mitchell, who lived in Providence, Rhode Island. She was a music teacher who died in a house fire in 1998. He continued around the wall, pointing out more women, all named Eleanor Mitchell, all born on April 17th, 1978, all bearing my face, all deceased. I don't understand, I said, though a terrible suspicion was forming in my mind. I believe they're all iterations of the same person, you, living in parallel timelines that occasionally intersect with ours. Parallel timelines, I repeated flatly. You're talking about alternate realities. That's science fiction, not science. 20 years ago, I would have agreed with you, but the evidence has become too substantial to ignore. He moved to a desk in the corner and picked up a thick file. The first case I documented was in 1994. A woman named Eleanor Mitchell appeared in a small town in Maine where another Eleanor Mitchell had died 6 months earlier. She lived there for approximately 3 months before disappearing without a trace. Since then, I've documented 17 similar occurrences across New England. Why Eleanor Mitchell? Why me?
Alexander shook his head. I don't know. Something about you, about all versions of you, seems to create these nexus points where realities overlap or intersect. It may be genetic, it may be something else entirely. Lily had been quiet, moving from photograph to photograph with an expression of intense concentration. Now she spoke, her voice small but clear. Is that why people at school said Mom was dead? Because she is, but she's also not? Alexander looked at her with newfound respect. That's a remarkably succinct way of putting it, yes. I wasn't ready to accept this fantastic explanation. Even if what you're suggesting were possible, and I'm not saying it is, it doesn't explain Lily. The Eleanor who died here didn't have a daughter. No, she didn't, Alexander agreed, and that's what makes your case particularly interesting. He turned to Lily. May I ask you something, Lily? Something that might seem strange? She glanced at me, and I nodded cautiously. What's your earliest memory? Alexander asked her. The very first thing you can remember. Lily thought for a moment, her brow furrowing in concentration. Moving to Harborview, she said finally, unpacking my toys in my new room. Not before that? Nothing from Boston? She shook her head slowly. I remember Boston. I remember our apartment and my school and Dad, but not clearly. It's like remembering a movie I watched, not something that happened to me. A chill ran through me. I knelt beside her, taking her small hands in mine. Lily, what are you saying? You remember your father, right? Your life in Boston? Her eyes filled with tears. I think so, but it's all fuzzy. Ever since we came here, it's like those memories are fading, but new ones are getting stronger. Like I've always been here, always been with you. Alexander spoke gently from behind me. We believe Lily is a manifestation of your subconscious, Eleanor, a creation of your mind made real when you crossed between realities. That's impossible, I said, but my conviction was weakening. Is it? He gestured around the laboratory. Blackwood Industries has been researching quantum physics and its applications for decades. The boundaries between what we once thought impossible and what we now know to be real are not as fixed as we once believed. You're saying I created Lily out of nothing? Not out of nothing. Out of love, out of need,
out of the desire for connection and family that exists in every version of you we've documented. He hesitated. The Eleanor who died here was deeply lonely. Her art was driven by that loneliness, that yearning for connection. Perhaps in your reality, you manifested that yearning as a child, as a family. I looked at Lily, who was watching me with those blue eyes so like my own. If what Alexander suggested was true, then she wasn't flesh and blood as I had always believed. But she was real as my love for her, as real as her own distinct personality and thoughts. If what you're saying is true, I said slowly, then what happens now? To me? To Lily? Alexander moved to one of the computer screens, pulling up what appeared to be a complex waveform. Based on the patterns we've observed in previous cases, you'll remain in this reality for approximately 6 months before the dimensional stability degrades. At that point, you'll likely disappear from this timeline, presumably returning to your own or moving to another. And Lily? He looked at her thoughtfully. That's what makes your case unique. We've never observed a companion manifestation before. In theory, she would go with you, being essentially an extension of your consciousness. But there's no way to be certain. Lily moved closer to me, wrapping her arms around my waist. I don't want to disappear, Mom. I hugged her tightly, glaring at Alexander over her head. You're frightening her. And frankly, I'm not convinced by any of this. It sounds like pseudoscientific nonsense designed to explain something you don't understand. I understand your skepticism, he said. I felt the same when I first encountered this phenomenon, but I've spent nearly 3 decades documenting and studying these cases. The pattern is undeniable. He gestured to the chair in the center of the lab. If you'll allow me, I can show you evidence that might be more convincing. What kind of evidence? A quantum resonance scan. It can detect and measure the dimensional vibration frequency of matter. Everything in this reality vibrates at a specific frequency. Things from other realities, like you and Lily, vibrate at a slightly different frequency. I looked down at Lily, who was still clinging to me. Is it safe? Completely non-invasive, Alexander assured me. Like an MRI, but without the confined space or noise. After a moment's hesitation, I agreed. Alexander helped me into the chair, while Lily watched from a safe distance. The machine hummed softly as it scanned me, data flowing across the connected screens. When it was finished, Alexander showed me the results, a visual representation of vibration frequencies, with most of the image in shades of blue, but my outline glowing a distinctive green. This green signature indicates matter vibrating at a frequency inconsistent with our reality. It's definitive proof that you originated in a different dimensional plane. I stared at the image, my mind struggling to process its implications. And Lily? Would you be willing to let us scan her as well?
I looked at Lily, who nodded bravely. It doesn't hurt, right? Not at all, Alexander promised. Lily took her turn in the chair, sitting very still as the machine hummed around her. When her scan appeared on the screen, I gasped. Unlike my solid green outline, Lily's image was a swirling mixture of blue and green, the colors intermingling in a complex pattern. Fascinating, Alexander murmured. She appears to be adapting to this reality, integrating with it on a quantum level. What does that mean? I demanded. I'm not entirely sure, he admitted, but it suggests that Lily may be becoming native to this timeline in a way that you aren't, almost as if she's putting down roots here. Lily climbed out of the chair and came to examine her own scan. So I'm real, but different real than Mom? Alexander smiled at her. That's a very good way of putting it, yes. I felt dizzy with the implications, reaching out to steady myself against a nearby table. If what Alexander was showing us was genuine, if his theories were correct, then everything I believed about myself, about reality, about the nature of existence was wrong. Why are you doing this? I asked suddenly. Why have you spent decades studying these dimensional anomalies? What do you get out of it? A shadow passed over Alexander's face. That's a fair question.
He walked to the wall of photographs and pointed to one I hadn't noticed before. A woman who resembled me but was older, perhaps in her 60s, with silver threading through her dark hair. This was Elizabeth Blackwood, my mother. She died when I was 12 years old. I don't understand. She looks like you, yes, because in a very real sense, she was you, another variant of Eleanor Mitchell from another timeline. He took a deep breath. 3 months after she died, another woman appeared in Harborview who looked exactly like her, but younger. She stayed for 5 months before vanishing. I was 13 when she disappeared, old enough to understand that something impossible had happened, but too young to do anything about it. "So this is personal for you," I said softly. "Very personal. I've devoted my life to understanding these dimensional intersections, hoping to find a way to stabilize them, to prevent the inevitable disappearance." He looked at Lily, a genuine kindness in his eyes. "I don't want you to lose your daughter, Eleanor, and I don't want Lily to lose her mother. If there's a way to anchor you both to this reality permanently, I'm determined to find it." For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a glimmer of hope. Not that Alexander's fantastic explanation was true, I still wasn't ready to fully accept that, but that regardless of what was happening, someone was genuinely trying to help us. "What do we do now?" I asked. "First, you continue living your lives as normally as possible. The more you integrate with this reality, form connections, establish routines, create memories, the stronger your quantum resonance with this timeline becomes." He glanced at the screens displaying our scans. "Based on Lily's results, I believe she's already anchoring herself here successfully. Your case is more complex, given that you're replacing a version of yourself who died in this timeline. And second, you work with me. Allow me to monitor your quantum signatures regularly, to document any changes. And," he hesitated, "I'd like you to try painting." "Painting? I told you, I'm not a painter. The Eleanor who died here was. If you can access that ability, it might help strengthen your connection to this timeline, help you integrate her existence with yours." It sounded ridiculous, yet something inside me responded to the suggestion, a faint stirring of interest, of curiosity. Had I ever tried painting? I couldn't remember doing so, yet the idea didn't feel entirely foreign. "Fine," I agreed. "I'll try painting, and will cooperate with your monitoring. But I need something from you in return." "Name it."
Protect Lily. Whatever is happening here, whatever the truth is about her origin or nature, she's a child. She deserves a chance to grow up safe and loved. Alexander's expression softened. "I give you my word. Protecting Lily is as important to me as it is to you, though perhaps for different reasons." As we prepare to leave the laboratory, Lily tugged at my hand. "Mom, if what Mr. Blackwood says is true, if I'm not a regular person, does that mean you're not really my mom?" I knelt to look her in the eyes, my heart breaking at the fear and uncertainty I saw there. "Listen to me, Lily. I don't know exactly what's happening here. I don't know if Mr. Blackwood's theories are correct or if there's some other explanation we haven't discovered yet. But I know one thing with absolute certainty. I am your mother. I love you more than anything in this world or any other, and no quantum resonance scan or parallel timeline theory will ever change that. Do you understand?" She nodded, throwing her arms around my neck in a fierce hug. "I love you too, Mom, and I don't want to disappear." "You won't," I promised, hoping desperately that I could keep that promise. "We'll figure this out together." The next few weeks were a strange balance of normality and the extraordinary. Lily returned to school, where the initial shock of my resurrection had evolved into a wary acceptance. I continued my graphic design work, while also, at Alexander's suggestion, setting up a small painting studio in the spare bedroom. To my surprise, I took to painting with an ease that suggested muscle memory. as if my hands remembered techniques my mind didn't. Within days, I was producing work that showed not just technical skill, but a distinctive style and emotional depth. The first time I completed a canvas, a seascape with stormy skies that seemed to pulse with longing and possibility, I stood back and felt a shock of recognition. This was Eleanor's work, the other Eleanor. Yet somehow, it was also mine. Twice a week, Lily and I visited Alexander's laboratory for quantum resonance scans. The results were encouraging. Lily's integration with this timeline was progressing steadily, the blue of this reality gradually becoming more dominant in her scan. My own results were more complex. The green signature remained strong, but patterns within it were shifting, as if my quantum structure was trying to align itself with this reality. Catherine Mitchell, the woman who was and wasn't my mother, became a regular presence in our lives. Initially wary of this elderly woman who claimed a relationship to me that I couldn't fully remember or acknowledge, I gradually came to appreciate her sharp mind and dry humor. She shared stories of the Eleanor who had died, her daughter, that sometimes resonated with my own memories and sometimes felt entirely foreign. She was always solitary, Catherine told me one afternoon as we sat in my kitchen drinking tea. Even as a child, not unhappy, just self-contained. She could spend hours alone with her sketchbook, completely content. I was the same, I admitted. At least I remember being that way. Until Lily. I glanced toward the living room where Lily was working on a school project, her small face scrunched in concentration. It's so strange. I have such clear memories of pregnancy, of her birth, of her first steps and words. Yet, according to everything we've learned, those memories can't be real. Catherine patted my hand. Real is a more complicated concept than most people realize. The love you feel for her is real. The person she is becoming is real. Perhaps that's what matters most. As weeks turned into months, Harborview's initial shock at my appearance gradually transformed into a cautious acceptance. The story had spread throughout the small community. Not the full truth as Alexander understood it, but a simplified version. Eleanor Mitchell, long-lost twin of the deceased artist, had come to Harborview unaware of her sister's death, with her young daughter in tow. It wasn't true, but it was easier for people to accept than parallel timelines and quantum resonance. I found myself settling into a life that was both new and eerily familiar. My painting improved rapidly, as if I were remembering rather than learning. Alexander arranged a small showing of my work at a local gallery, where several pieces sold for surprising sums. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was essentially continuing the career of the woman I had somehow replaced. But as our situation stabilized, a new concern emerged. According to Alexander's research, my expiration date in this timeline was approaching, the 6-month mark when previous dimensional travelers had disappeared. By his calculations, Lily and I had arrived in Harborview on August 27th, which meant we could expect to vanish around February 27th, just 3 weeks away. Your integration is progressing, he assured me during one of our monitoring sessions, better than any case I've previously documented. And Lily's is remarkable. She's nearly 70% aligned with this timeline now. But it's not enough, is it? I asked, studying the scans. Not to keep us here permanently. Alexander's hesitation told me everything I needed to know. There might be a way, he said finally. Something I've theorized but never had the opportunity to test. A quantum anchoring procedure that could potentially stabilize your resonance with this timeline indefinitely. What kind of procedure? He explained the concept, a process that would use Blackwood Industries' experimental quantum technology to gradually shift my vibrational frequency to match this reality's. It would require multiple sessions over the remaining 3 weeks, each one progressively aligning my quantum signature more completely with this timeline.
What are the risks? I asked, glancing at Lily, who was drawing contentedly in a corner of the lab, seemingly unfazed now by our regular visits to this strange place. Alexander's expression grew serious.
The primary risk is memory loss. As your quantum signature shifts, memories specific to your original timeline may fade or disappear entirely. You could lose significant portions of your past, or at least what you perceive as your past. Including my memories of Lily, of our life together? Possibly, though given Lily's unique nature as a manifestation that crossed timelines with you, those memories might be preserved. He paused. There's also a small risk of quantum destabilization, essentially accelerating the process we're trying to prevent. Instead of disappearing in 3 weeks, you could disappear immediately. And Lily, what are the risks for her? Lower, given her advanced integration, but not zero. I watched my daughter, this impossible child who, according to everything we'd learned, was a manifestation of my deepest desires made quantum flesh. Whether she had been born of my body as I remembered or created through some incomprehensible dimensional phenomenon, she was real, she was mine, and the thought of losing her or of her losing me was unbearable. "When can we start?" I asked. Alexander began the quantum anchoring process the next day. The procedure itself was surprisingly simple from my perspective. I sat in the specialized chair while machinery hummed around me, feeling nothing more than a slight tingling sensation and occasional waves of dizziness. Lily underwent a modified version, calibrated to her already advancing integration. The effects, however, were immediately noticeable. That very night, I dreamed of painting in a studio I recognized as my own, though I had never seen it before. The next morning, I found myself automatically turning toward a coffee shop I had never visited, somehow knowing they made the almond croissants I preferred. Small memories that belonged to the other Eleanor, to the Eleanor Vlad died, were seeping into my consciousness. At the same time, certain memories of my life before Harborview began to blur. I could no longer recall the exact layout of our Boston apartment. The face of my divorce attorney faded until I couldn't picture him at all. Even David's features grew indistinct in my mind, though the narrative of our marriage and divorce remained intact. Lily experienced similar effects, though in her case, the new memories seemed to bring joy rather than confusion. She came home from school bubbling with stories about events she now remembered. A field trip to the Harborview Lighthouse last year, winning a spelling bee in 3rd grade, friends she had known since kindergarten. "Mom, remember when we went tide pooling at Crescent Beach and I found that huge starfish?" she asked one evening, her eyes bright with the vivid memory. "Of course," I said automatically, and was startled to realize I did remember it. The cool spring day, Lily's yellow rain boots, her squeal of delight at discovering the purple starfish clinging to a rock. A memory that couldn't possibly be mine, yet somehow was. As the quantum anchoring sessions continued, these memory shifts intensified. I began to recall gallery openings I had never attended, conversations with Catherine spanning decades rather than months, friendships with Harborview residents I had only recently met. My paintings evolved, incorporating techniques and themes that felt intimately familiar, though I had never consciously learned them. The scans confirmed what I was experiencing subjectively. My quantum signature was gradually shifting, the green of my original timeline fading as the blue of this reality became more dominant. Lily's integration progressed even more rapidly, her scan now showing only faint traces of green among the solid blue. "It's working better than I dared hope," Alexander told me 2 weeks into the process. "Your integration rate has exceeded all projections. And Lily is nearly fully anchored to this timeline now." "So she's safe?" I asked, the question that had driven me through this strange journey. "Even if something happens to me, she won't disappear." "Based on these readings, she's as much a part of this reality now as anyone born here." His expression softened. "She's real, Eleanor. Whatever her origins, whatever process created her, she's as real as you or me." Relief washed through me so intensely that tears sprang to my eyes. Whatever happened to me, Lily would be safe. She would continue to exist, to grow, to live her life in this timeline that was becoming more her home than any other.
But as my own integration progressed, I found myself facing an unexpected emotional conflict. The more I remembered of Eleanor's life in this timeline, her solitary existence, her dedication to art, her quiet friendships with people like Alexander and others in the community, the more I felt I was losing myself, the Eleanor I had been before arriving in Harborview. Even knowing that many of those memories might not be real in the conventional sense, they were real to me. They had shaped my identity, my understanding of myself. As they faded, replaced by memories of a life I hadn't actually lived, I experienced a profound sense of loss, a grief for the self I had been, or believed I had been.
The night before our final quantum anchoring session, I sat alone in my studio, Eleanor's studio that had become mine, surrounded by paintings that reflected both her artistic vision and my own emerging style. Through the window, I could see the harbor lights twinkling against the February darkness, the same view she had painted dozens of times, the same view I now found myself compelled to capture on canvas again and again. Who would I be tomorrow when the process was complete? Would I still be the Eleanor who remembered giving birth to Lily, who remembered loving and leaving David, who remembered a life in Boston that might never have existed? Or would I become entirely the Eleanor of this timeline with only the memories this reality's Eleanor had created before her death? And did it matter? If I retained the essence of who I was, my love for Lily, my creativity, my determination, did the specific memories that shaped me matter so much? I had no answers, only questions that swirled like the oils on my palette, blending into new and unpredictable patterns. The final quantum anchoring session was more intense than the previous ones. The tingling sensation increased to a near painful level, and the dizziness became so severe that I gripped the arms of the chair to keep from falling, though I was securely strapped in. Waves of disorientation washed over me, moments when I couldn't remember my own name, flashes of memories that contradicted each other, sensations of being in multiple places simultaneously. Through it all, I focused on Lily, who was undergoing her own final session in a chair beside mine. Her face was peaceful, showing none of the distress I was experiencing, further evidence that her integration was more natural, more complete than my own. When it was finally over, Alexander helped me from the chair, supporting me as my legs threatened to buckle. "How do you feel?" he asked, his voice seeming to come from very far away. "Like I'm everywhere and nowhere," I managed to say. "Like I'm multiple people occupying the same space." "That's to be expected. Your consciousness is reconciling multiple timeline memories. It should stabilize within 24 to 48 hours. Lily hopped down from her chair with the resilience of childhood, apparently experiencing none of my disorientation. "Can we get ice cream?" she asked brightly. "I want to go to Sullivan's. They have the butter pecan you like, Mom." I blinked at her, momentarily confused. Had I always liked butter pecan? Or was that Eleanor's preference, the other Eleanor? But then, weren't we the same person now? Or becoming the same? "Sure, sweetheart," I said, the simple normalcy of her request anchoring me in the present moment. "Ice cream sounds perfect." That night, I dreamed more vividly than ever before. Not discrete dreams, but a kaleidoscope of memories, impressions, and experiences from multiple timelines. I saw myself as a child in Worcester, as a student at MassArt, as a young professional in Boston. But I also saw myself alone in a studio, painting through the night, and walking along Harborview Shore at dawn, and sitting in Catherine's kitchen discussing art and life. I saw versions of myself that couldn't possibly be memories, teaching music in Providence, working in a library in Portland, tending a garden somewhere I didn't recognize, lives I might have lived in other timelines, other realities, all flowing together in my dreaming mind. And through it all, a constant, Lily, sometimes as I remembered her, sometimes younger or older, sometimes in settings we had never shared, but always unmistakably my daughter, the one constant across the shifting landscape of my identity. When I woke the next morning, I felt different, integrated in a way I couldn't quite articulate. The memories were still there, all of them, but they no longer seemed to contradict each other.
Instead, they existed as layers of a single life, like the layers of paint that created depth in my artwork. I was Eleanor Mitchell, who had grown up in Worcester, studied at MassArt, and become a painter. I was Eleanor Mitchell, who had moved to Harborview, lived alone, and died in a car accident. I was Eleanor Mitchell, who had married, had a child, divorced, and crossed between timelines. I was all of these women, and none of them, something new created from the quantum integration of multiple possibilities. When I went downstairs, I found Lily already at the kitchen table, drawing with the intense concentration that reminded me so much of myself at her age. She looked up as I entered, her face breaking into a smile that filled me with joy regardless of which timeline's memories I accessed. "Morning, Mom. I made you coffee. Well, I set up the coffee maker the way you showed me. I didn't actually turn it on because you said I'm not allowed to use appliances without you." The casual domesticity of the moment brought tears to my eyes. This was real as anything could be in a universe where realities overlapped and intertwined, where quantum resonance could transport consciousness across dimensional boundaries, where love could manifest a child from pure longing. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, kissing the top of her head as I passed to the coffee maker. "What are you drawing?" She held up her sketchbook, showing a surprisingly skilled rendering of our house, with figures on the porch that I recognized as herself, me, and Catherine. "It's for Grandma's birthday next week. Do you think she'll like it?" Grandma, Catherine, the woman who was and wasn't my mother, who had lost a daughter and somehow found her again in me. "She'll love it," I assured her, feeling the rightness of this new reality we had created together. Not just Lily and me, but all of us who had been drawn into this impossible situation and found a way forward through it.
Later that day, Alexander called with the results of our final scans taken after the anchoring procedure. "It's remarkable," he said, not bothering to hide his excitement. "Lily's integration is 100% complete. For all quantum measures, she is fully native to this timeline now. And your results, Eleanor? You're at 92% integration, well above the threshold we calculated for stability. You're not going to disappear. You're anchored here, permanently." Relief flooded through me, not just for myself, but for Lily, for Catherine, for the life we were building in this reality that had become our home. "Thank you," I said, inadequate words for what he had given us, for everything. "Don't thank me yet," he replied, his tone shifting to something more serious. "There's something else we need to discuss, something about your original arrival in this timeline that I haven't told you." "What do you mean?" "I'd rather not discuss it over the phone. Can you come to the lab tomorrow? Alone, preferably." Unease rippled through me, disturbing the newfound peace I had been feeling. "Is it something about Lily? Is she in danger?" "No, nothing like that. Lily is fine, better than fine. This is about you, about the circumstances of your transition between timelines. It's complicated." I agreed to meet him the next day, apprehension mixing with curiosity. What hadn't he told me? What more could there possibly be to this already impossible situation? That evening, as Lily and I walked along the harbor after dinner, a ritual we had established in our 6 months in Harborview, I found myself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought us here. From the terrifying moment when Lily had come home in tears, convinced I was dead, to the gradual unraveling of reality as I had understood it, to this new integrated existence where multiple timelines of memory coexisted in my mind. "Mom," Lily said, breaking into my thoughts, "are we going to stay here forever now?" I looked down at her, this miracle child who defied scientific explanation, yet was as real as the ground beneath our feet. "Yes, sweetheart, this is our home now. We're staying." She nodded, satisfied. "Good, I like it here. I like having Grandma Catherine and Mr. Blackwood and my friends at school." She paused, looking out at the harbor, her expression suddenly serious beyond her years. "And I think the other you, the one who died, I think she'd be happy we're here, like we're continuing her story for her." The insight struck me with its simple wisdom. Perhaps that was exactly what had happened, not a replacement or an erasure, but a continuation. The Eleanor who had died in that car accident 2 years ago had been part of an unfinished story. Now, Lily and I were writing the next chapters, building on the foundation she had laid in this reality. "I think you're right," I told her, squeezing her hand gently. "I think she would be happy." That night, I dreamed of driving along Route 27 in the rain, windshield wipers beating a hypnotic rhythm as the coastal road curved dangerously ahead. I knew what was coming: the sharp turn, the skid, the terrifying moment of weightlessness as the car left the road, but I couldn't stop it, couldn't change the inevitable outcome. I woke gasping, sheets tangled around me, the phantom sensation of falling still gripping my body. For a disorienting moment, I wasn't sure which Eleanor I was, the one who had died in that crash or the one who had somehow crossed between realities to take her place. Both, I realized as my breathing steadied. I was both and neither, something new formed from the quantum integration of multiple possibilities. The next morning, after Lily left for school, I drove to Blackwood Industries for my meeting with Alexander. The dream of the crash lingered in my mind, leaving me unsettled and on edge. Alexander was waiting in his office, his expression grave as I entered. Without preamble, he gestured for me to sit and handed me a file folder. "What's this?" I asked, not opening it. "Police reports, witness statements, and forensic analysis from the accident that killed Eleanor Mitchell 2 years ago." He paused, or rather, didn't kill her. I stared at him, not comprehending. "What do you mean, didn't kill her? You said she died in the crash." "That was the official finding, yes. The car went off the road, caught fire, and the driver was pronounced dead at the scene." He tapped the folder in my hands. "But my own investigation revealed inconsistencies. The body was too badly burned for visual identification. Dental records were used to confirm identity, but there were irregularities in how those records were processed." A cold sensation spread through my chest. "What are you saying?" "I believe Eleanor Mitchell, the Eleanor native to this timeline, didn't die in that crash. I believe she was taken and her death was staged to cover the abduction." "Taken? By whom? And why?" Alexander's expression darkened. "By people who have been monitoring these dimensional anomalies for much longer than I have. People with resources and power far beyond my own. People who wanted to study Eleanor because of her unique quantum signature." The implications were staggering. If what Alexander was suggesting was true, then the Eleanor who had lived in Harborview, the woman whose memories now partially occupied my mind, might still be alive somewhere. "Do you have proof?" I asked, finally opening the folder and scanning the documents inside. "Nothing definitive, but patterns of evidence, yes." He pointed to specific sections of the reports: inconsistencies in the timeline of first responders, unusual gaps in the chain of custody for physical evidence, signatures on authorization forms from officials who shouldn't have been involved in a simple traffic accident. For 2 years, I've been trying to trace these breadcrumbs, to find out what really happened to Eleanor. I've made progress, but not enough. He leaned forward, his expression intense. And then you appeared. Another Eleanor Mitchell, crossing between timelines exactly as my research predicted might be possible. You think my arrival is connected to her disappearance? The thought made me dizzy with its implications. He think it's possible that whatever they did to her, whatever experiments or procedures they performed, might have created a quantum disruption significant enough to pull you from your timeline into this one, a vacancy in reality that needed to be filled. I thought of the dreams I'd been having, the crash on Route 27 that I had never experienced, yet somehow remembered. Were those actually Eleanor's memories from that night? Not of dying, but of being taken against her will. "If she's alive," I said slowly, "if she was taken as you believe, then what does that mean for me, for my presence here?" Alexander spread his hands. "I don't know. This is uncharted territory. In theory, a timeline shouldn't be able to sustain 2 identical quantum signatures simultaneously. It would create a paradox. So if she returned, you might be forced out.
back to your original timeline or to another one. Or the quantum anchoring we've performed might be sufficient to allow both of you to exist here. There's no way to know without precedent. I sat back, overwhelmed by this new complication. Just when I had begun to accept my place in this reality, to integrate the memories and experiences of the Eleanor who had lived here, I was faced with the possibility that she might still exist, might someday return to reclaim her life, her home, her identity. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because I finally found a lead, a concrete location where I believe she might be held, a research facility in northern Vermont, ostensibly a private medical center, but with security and resources far beyond what such a facility should require." He hesitated. "I'm planning to investigate, to find out if she is there and, if possible, to help her escape. I thought you deserved to know, to make your own decisions about what this might mean for you and Lily." My thoughts went immediately to my daughter, the impossible child who had crossed between realities with me, who is now fully integrated into this timeline. What would happen to her if the original Eleanor returned? Would Lily's existence be threatened? Would she be forced back into non-existence, a quantum anomaly corrected by the return of the timeline's natural order? "I can't risk Lily," I said firmly. "Whatever happens, whatever you discover, I need to know that she'll be safe." According to all our measurements, Lily is now fully native to this timeline. Her quantum signature is indistinguishable from anyone born here. Even if complications arise with your own situation, she should remain stable. Should, not would. The uncertainty hung in the air between us. "When are you going to this facility?" I asked. "Tomorrow night. I have a contact who can get me access to their security systems, create a window for me to get in and out undetected." I made a decision then, one that surprised me with its immediacy and certainty. "I'm coming with you." Alexander's eyebrows rose. "That's not advisable. The risk is mine to take," I interrupted. "If there's any chance that the Eleanor from this timeline is being held against her will, I need to help her. Not just because she's essentially me, but because it's the right thing to do. No one deserves to be imprisoned and experimented on." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I understand, but this isn't a decision to make lightly. If we succeed, if we find her and bring her back, the consequences for you could be severe." "I know," I said quietly. "But I also know I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try to help her. Not that I have her memories, know her thoughts, understand her life. In a very real sense, she's part of me now." We spent the next hour reviewing Alexander's plans for infiltrating the facility, the security systems, the layout he had obtained through various unofficial channels, the limited time window we would have to get in, locate Eleanor if she was indeed there, and get out undetected. "We leave tomorrow at 4 p.m., he said as our meeting concluded. "The drive to Vermont will take about 4 hours. We'll observe the facility from a distance until our window opens at approximately 2 a.m. I nodded, already mentally preparing for what I would tell Lily, how I would arrange for her care during my absence. Catherine would help, I was certain. Whatever happened, Lily would be safe and loved.
As I drove home, my mind was a tumult of conflicting emotions. Fear for what we might find at the facility, concern about what the original Eleanor's return might mean for my own existence in this timeline, determination to do what was right, regardless of the personal cost. But beneath it all was a strange sense of rightness, of purpose. Perhaps this was why I had been drawn to Harborview in the first place, not just to find a home for Lily and myself, but to right a wrong, to rescue a woman who was and wasn't me from those who had taken her freedom. I spent that evening with Lily as normally as possible, helping with homework, making dinner, watching her favorite show together. When she was in bed, I called Catherine and asked if she could stay with Lily the following night. I wouldn't ask if it weren't important, I told her, unable to explain the full truth over the phone. Of course, Catherine agreed without hesitation. Lily is always welcome here. But Eleanor, is everything all right? You sound troubled. I hope it will be, I said honestly. I'll explain everything when I return. The next day passed in a blur of anticipation and preparation. I told Lily she would be having a sleepover at Grandma Catherine's, an arrangement that delighted her, and packed an overnight bag for her with special care, making sure to include her favorite stuffed rabbit and the book we were currently reading together at bedtime. At 3:30, I drove Lily to Catherine's cozy house on the other side of town. As we said goodbye, I found myself holding her longer than usual, breathing in the scent of her hair, memorizing the feel of her small body in my arms. "It's just one night, Mom," she said with a laugh, squirming to be released. "I'll see you tomorrow." "I know, sweetheart. I just love you so much." "Love you too," she replied easily, already distracted by the cookies Catherine had set out for her. Catherine walked me to the door, her sharp eyes missing nothing of my tension. "Whatever you're doing," she said quietly, "be careful. That child needs you." I nodded, unable to speak around the sudden lump in my throat. Then I was in my car, driving to meet Alexander for a journey that might change everything about the life I had built in Harborview. The drive to Vermont was largely silent, both of us lost in our own thoughts as the familiar coastal landscape gave way to rolling hills and eventually the more rugged terrain of the Green Mountains. Alexander had outfitted us with what he called the essentials: black clothing, communication devices, tools for bypassing basic security systems, and a tablet loaded with the facility's layout and our planned entry and exit routes. "My contact will create a gap in their electronic surveillance at exactly 2:15 a.m., he explained as we parked on a remote Forest Service road about a mile from the facility. "We'll have approximately 20 minutes to get in, locate Eleanor if she's there, and get out before the systems reset." We used the remaining hours of darkness to approach the facility on foot, moving carefully through the dense forest until we reached a position that offered a clear view of the complex. It was smaller than I had expected, a modern 2-story building surrounded by a high security fence with minimal exterior lighting and no obvious signs indicating its purpose. "It's deliberately nondescript," Alexander whispered as we observed from our concealed position. "On paper, it's a private research center specializing in neurodegenerative diseases. In reality, it's operated by a shadow organization within the Department of Defense, the same group that took over Richard's quantum research after his death." The mention of Richard, a name I recognized from Eleanor's memories, triggered a cascade of images in my mind. A kind-faced older man explaining complex equations on a whiteboard, heated arguments about ethical boundaries in quantum research, a warning about people who would exploit his discoveries for purposes he had never intended. "You knew him," I said, the realization dawning. "Richard Porter. He was Eleanor's mentor at MassArt and later a colleague in quantum theory research." Alexander nodded. "He recognized Eleanor's unique quantum signature decades before I developed the technology to measure it. He believed she might be a natural dimensional traveler, someone whose consciousness could potentially move between timelines without technological assistance. Is that why they took her? To study this ability?" "I believe so. Richard protected her as long as he could, keeping his observations about her quantum nature theoretical rather than identifying her specifically. But after his death, his research was declassified and reviewed. Someone made the connection." At precisely 2:10 a.m., Alexander's phone vibrated with a text message. "It's time," he said, pocketing the device. "Remember, we stay together, we move quickly, and if anything goes wrong, we abort immediately. No heroics." I nodded. We moved swiftly across the open ground to the fence. Alexander attached a small device to the electronic lock on the gate, and within seconds it clicked open. We slipped inside and hurried to a service entrance on the building's east side, where another of Alexander's devices made short work of the security system. Inside, the facility was clinically sterile. White walls, fluorescent lighting dimmed for the night shift, the faint hum of sophisticated equipment. We moved silently down the main corridor, consulting the tablet's map as we searched for the research wing where Eleanor might be held. The facility seemed eerily deserted.
We encountered no security guards, no late-working researchers, not even custodial staff. The absence of people made me increasingly uneasy, as if we were walking into a trap. "Where is everyone?" I whispered as we rounded a corner into a hallway marked "Authorized Personnel Only."
Night shift is minimal. 2 security guards who should be in the main monitoring station, which we've bypassed, and perhaps 1 or 2 medical staff for the research subjects. Alexander checked his watch. We have 12 minutes remaining in our window. The research wing was secured by another electronic lock, which took Alexander nearly 2 precious minutes to bypass. When the door finally slid open, we entered a space that more closely resembled a hospital ward than a laboratory. A central nurse's station, surrounded by rooms with observation windows and medical monitoring equipment. Most of the rooms appeared empty, their beds neatly made and waiting. But at the far end of the ward, a soft light spilled from one room, suggesting occupation. We moved cautiously toward it, alert for any sign of staff or security. Through the observation window, I could see a figure in the bed, female, dark-haired, connected to various monitoring devices that beeped softly in the quiet room. Even from a distance, I recognized her. How could I not? It was my own face I saw on the pillow, though gaunt with illness or drugged sleep, the dark hair longer than I wore mine now. "It's her," I breathed, a mixture of vindication and horror washing through me. "She's here." Alexander was already examining the electronic lock on the door. "This is more sophisticated than the others," he murmured. "It may take longer to bypass." "We don't have longer," I reminded him, checking my own watch. "We have less than 8 minutes before the security systems reactivate." He worked feverishly on the lock while I kept watch, scanning the ward for any sign of movement or surveillance. Finally, with a soft beep, the door unlocked. Inside the room, the air was cool and antiseptic, filled with the rhythmic sounds of medical equipment. Eleanor, the original Eleanor of this timeline, lay motionless except for the slight rise and fall of her chest. Up close, I could see how thin she had become, how pale, as if she had been here in this room for months without sunlight or proper nutrition. "Eleanor," Alexander said softly, moving to her bedside and gently touching her shoulder. "Eleanor, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered but didn't open. An IV line ran into her arm, likely delivering sedatives or other drugs to keep her compliant. "We need to disconnect these monitors carefully," Alexander said. "If we trigger any alarms, we're finished." Working together, we carefully removed the monitoring sensors one by one, using Alexander's tablet to loop the previous readings and prevent the system from detecting the changes. The IV was more problematic. Removing it improperly could cause harm, but leaving it in would keep her sedated and unable to walk out on her own. "I have medical training," Alexander said, surprising me. "Let me do this." He expertly removed the IV, applying pressure and then a small bandage to the insertion site. Within moments, Eleanor's breathing changed slightly, becoming less shallow and regular as the sedatives began to leave her system. "Eleanor," he said again, more urgently this time, "it's Alexander. We're here to take you home." Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then gradually sharpening as awareness returned. She looked at Alexander with confusion, then turned her head slightly and saw me. The shock that registered on her face, my face, was profound. Her eyes widened, her mouth opened in a silent gasp, and for a moment I feared she might scream or faint. But instead, she simply stared, her gaze moving over my features with bewildered recognition. "You're me," she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. "Yes," I said simply. "It's complicated and we don't have time to explain now. We need to get you out of here. Can you walk?" She nodded weakly, already struggling to sit up. Alexander supported her, helping her swing her legs over the side of the bed. She was dressed in a simple hospital gown, her limbs thin and pale against the white fabric. "My research," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "They've been using me to test interdimensional travel, forcing me to—" She broke off, shaking her head as if to clear it. "The data, we can't leave it here."
We have less than 4 minutes, Alexander warned, checking his watch again. We need to move now. There's a laptop, Eleanor insisted, pointing to a small workstation in the corner of the room. Everything's on it, all their research, what they've been doing to me, to others like me. We can't leave without it. Alexander hesitated, then nodded. Get it, he told me. I'll help Eleanor. I hurried to the workstation and found the laptop, slipping it into the small backpack Alexander had brought. By the time I returned, he had wrapped Eleanor in a blanket from the bed and was supporting her as she took tentative steps toward the door. 1 minute 30 seconds, he said tensely. We need to hurry. There's a laptop, Eleanor insisted, pointing to a small workstation in the corner of the room. Everything's on it, all their research, what they've been doing to me, to others like me. We can't leave without it. Alexander hesitated, then nodded. Get it, he told me. I'll help Eleanor. I hurried to the workstation and found the laptop, slipping it into the small backpack Alexander had brought. By the time I returned, he had wrapped Eleanor in a blanket from the bed and was supporting her as she took tentative steps toward the door. 1 minute 30 seconds, he said tensely. We need to hurry. We moved as quickly as Eleanor's weakened condition would allow, retracing our steps through the research wing, down the main corridor, and toward the service entrance we had used to enter the facility. Eleanor leaned heavily on Alexander, her breathing labored from even this minimal exertion, but her eyes were alert now, taking in her surroundings with intelligent awareness. Just as we reached the service entrance, Alexander's phone vibrated with an urgent pattern. The security systems are reactivating early, he said, his voice tight with alarm. We have seconds, not minutes. We burst through the door into the cool night air just as alarms began to sound behind us. Lights flared to life around the facility's perimeter, and in the distance I could hear shouts and the sound of running feet. We won't make it to the fence before they catch us, Alexander said grimly. Change of plan, this way. He led us not toward the perimeter fence where we had entered, but toward a service road that ran along the facility's northern boundary. There, partially concealed behind a maintenance shed, was a small utility vehicle, the kind used by groundskeepers at large facilities. Can you hotwire it? I asked as we helped Eleanor into the back seat. No need, Alexander replied, producing a key. My inside contact left it for emergency extraction. I didn't mention it earlier because I hoped we wouldn't need it. A vehicle departure is much more conspicuous than slipping back through the woods on foot. He started the engine just as security personnel began to emerge from the building behind us. Without waiting for them to spot us, Alexander accelerated down the service road, away from the main entrance and toward what appeared to be a maintenance access point in the perimeter fence. They'll be looking for us on the main roads, he said as we bumped along the unpaved track. But there's a network of Forest Service roads that can get us back to the highway from here. It will take longer, but we're less likely to be intercepted. In the back seat, Eleanor had closed her eyes, either from exhaustion or to shield herself from the jarring ride. I turned to check on her periodically, still struggling to process the reality of her existence. This woman who was me and yet not me, whose life I had partially lived for the past 6 months, whose memories now mingled with my own. We drove for nearly an hour through dark forest roads before Alexander deemed it safe to return to more traveled routes. By then, Eleanor had fallen into what appeared to be genuine sleep rather than drugged unconsciousness, her face relaxed in a way that made her look even more like me. What happens now? I asked quietly, mindful of not waking her. Alexander kept his eyes on the road, but reached over to squeeze my hand briefly. Now we take her home, help her recover, and figure out what to do about the fact that there are 2 Eleanor Mitchells in Harborview. Will the quantum anchoring you performed on me be enough? Can we both exist in the same timeline? Theoretically, yes. Your quantum signature should be sufficiently differentiated now that paradox effects are unlikely. He glanced at me briefly. But the practical implications, 2 identical women with shared histories and memories, those are beyond anything I've encountered in my research. I thought about Lily, about Catherine, about the life I had built in Harborview over the past 6 months. Would there be room in that life for the original Eleanor? Would she want her identity, her home, her existence back? And if she did, where would that leave me? "One step at a time," Alexander said, as if reading my thoughts. "First, we get her safely to Harborview and help her recover her strength. Then we'll figure out the rest together." We drove through the remainder of the night, stopping only once for fuel at a remote gas station where the sleepy attendant barely glanced at us. Eleanor slept through most of the journey, occasionally murmuring in her sleep, but never fully waking. It was just past dawn when we reached Harborview, the familiar coastal landscape emerging from the early morning mist. Alexander drove not to my house, Eleanor's house, but to his own residence, a modern home overlooking the northern end of the harbor. "She'll be safer here for now," he explained as we carefully helped the still groggy Eleanor from the car. "My security system is state-of-the-art, and no one would think to look for her here." Inside, he settled Eleanor in a guest bedroom with a view of the water, arranging for a local doctor he trusted to examine her discreetly. The doctor confirmed what we had suspected. Eleanor had been kept sedated for extended periods, her physical condition weakened by lack of exercise and proper nutrition, but with no permanent damage that he could detect. Rest, proper food, gradual return to activity, he prescribed before leaving. She should recover her physical strength within a few weeks. As the morning progressed, Eleanor became more alert, more present. She accepted the light breakfast Alexander prepared, ate slowly but with evident appreciation for real food, and then asked the question I had been dreading. "Who are you?" she said, looking directly at me. "I mean, I know you're me, somehow, but how is that possible?" Alexander and I exchanged glances, and then I told her everything. My arrival in Harborview with Lily, the discovery that she had supposedly died, the theories about quantum resonance and parallel timelines, the process by which I had gradually integrated into this reality that had been hers. She listened without interruption, her expression shifting from confusion to wonder to something like scientific fascination.
"So, Lily," she said when I had finished, "this child who came with you, she's a quantum manifestation? A creation of consciousness made physical through dimensional transfer?" "That's our best understanding," Alexander confirmed, "though she's now fully integrated into this timeline. For all practical purposes, she's as real as anyone born here." Eleanor nodded slowly. "I always wanted children," she said quietly, "but my work, my independence, I never found the right time, the right situation." She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, and now there's a child who is, in some sense, mine, though she has no idea who I am. "She knows about you," I said, "or at least she knows about the Eleanor Mitchell who supposedly died. The whole town does, after my arrival caused such confusion. We've told her a simplified version of the truth, that realities can sometimes overlap, that people can exist in different versions across those realities. She's very intelligent," Alexander added, "far more adaptable to these concepts than most adults would be." Eleanor seemed to absorb this information, processing it with the same analytical focus I recognized from my own thought patterns. "And now?" she asked finally. "What happens now that there are two of us?" It was the question we had all been avoiding, the uncertainty that hung over this improbable reunion. "First, you recover," Alexander said firmly. "Regain your strength, process what you've been through. Meanwhile, we analyze the data on the laptop we recovered, understand exactly what they were doing to you and why. And then," Eleanor pressed, "then we figure out how two Eleanor Mitchells can coexist in one small town." I said, "Whether that's possible, and if so, how we manage the practical aspects." Eleanor looked out the window at the Harborview, so familiar to both of us. "I've spent 2 years as a prisoner, a test subject. I'm not eager to hide away now that I'm free." She turned back to me. "But I also recognize that you've built a life here, with my memories, in my house, with a child who knows you as her mother. I don't want to destroy that." The generosity of this statement from a woman who had every right to reclaim her identity, her life, her very existence, moved me deeply. We'll find a solution, I promised, one that allows us both to live with dignity and purpose. Over the next few days, as Eleanor rested and began to recover at Alexander's home, I returned to my normal routine with Lily, picking her up from Catherine's house and resuming our daily life as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But everything had changed, and the knowledge of Eleanor's existence, her return from presumed death, weighed on me constantly. Catherine, perceptive as always, noticed my preoccupation. "Something's happened," she said, when she came for dinner a few days after our return from Vermont. "Something significant." Lily was in her room doing homework, leaving us free to speak privately in the kitchen. I took a deep breath and told Catherine the truth, that her daughter, the original Eleanor of this timeline, was alive and recovering at Alexander's house. She sat very still as I spoke, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. When I finished, she asked only one question: "When can I see her?" The reunion between Catherine and Eleanor took place the following day in Alexander's home. I wasn't present. It seemed an intrusion on a moment that belonged to them alone. But Alexander told me later that there had been tears, long embraces, and hours of conversation as Eleanor recounted her ordeal and Catherine shared the events of the 2 years she had believed her daughter dead. "And did they discuss me?" I asked, unable to help myself. "My presence here? My relationship with Catherine?" "Briefly," Alexander said. "Catherine made it clear that while she had accepted you into her life, first as a strange duplicate of her daughter and then as something more, her relationship with you doesn't diminish her joy at Eleanor's return." It was the diplomatic answer I had expected, but it didn't address the fundamental question of how we would move forward, how 2 Eleanor Mitchells can coexist in Harborview without creating confusion, resentment, or practical complications that would make life untenable for one or both of us. That question began to resolve itself in unexpected ways over the following weeks. As Eleanor regained her strength, she spent more time reviewing the data we had recovered from the facility, information about the government's quantum research, the experiments performed on her, and the broader implications for interdimensional theory. "They were using me as a beacon," she explained, during one of our increasingly frequent meetings, trying to strengthen my natural quantum resonance to draw other versions of myself from parallel timelines. "They succeeded beyond their expectations when you arrived, not just as a temporary dimensional echo, but as a fully physical transfer with independent consciousness." "And Lily?" I asked. "How did they explain her?" "They don't, not adequately. She represents a quantum phenomenon they hadn't predicted, a manifestation created through the transfer process itself." Eleanor's expression softened when she spoke of Lily, though they had not yet met. "From a scientific perspective, she's extraordinary. From a human perspective, she's a miracle." As we discussed the research, the implications, and our unique situation, I began to notice something unexpected, a growing sense of camaraderie between us, a connection that transcended the strangeness of our circumstances. Eleanor didn't resent my presence as I had feared she might. Instead, she approached our situation with the same analytical curiosity and adaptability that I recognized in myself. "I've been thinking," she said one afternoon as we sat in Alexander's study reviewing more of the recovered data, "about names, identities, the practical aspects of our situation." "And?" I prompted when she paused. "I don't want to be Eleanor Mitchell anymore," she said simply. "Or rather, I don't need to be the only Eleanor Mitchell." I stared at her, not comprehending. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that after 2 years as a prisoner, subjected to experiments and treated as a research subject rather than a person, I'm ready for a fresh start, a new identity." She smiled slightly. "You've integrated parts of my life into yours, my memories, my home, my mother. Perhaps it's fitting that I integrate parts of your life into mine." "Such as?" "A new name, for one. In your original timeline, you were married to a man named David Mitchell, took his surname. Before that, you were Eleanor Lawson, correct?"
I nodded, the memories of that other life still present, though somewhat faded after the quantum anchoring process. Eleanor Lawson, she repeated. I like it. It's both familiar and new. A way to honor who I was while acknowledging that I'm no longer quite the same person after what I've experienced. The simplicity and elegance of her solution stunned me. With a change of name, we could both exist in Harborview without the constant confusion of identical identities. She would become Eleanor Lawson, artist, survivor, woman remaking her life after trauma. I would remain Eleanor Mitchell, graphic designer, mother, woman who had found a home in a reality not originally her own. Are you sure? I asked. It's your identity, your life here. I'm the interloper. She shook her head. We're both interlopers in a sense. You from another timeline, me from what amounts to a 2-year absence. Neither of us is exactly who we were before, and that's okay. She leaned forward, her expression earnest. Besides, you have Lily. She knows you as Eleanor Mitchell, as her mother. Changing your identity would be confusing and potentially traumatic for her. The generosity of this gesture, allowing me to keep the name, the identity, the life I had built, moved me deeply. Thank you, I said simply, knowing she would understand all that those 2 words encompassed. With the question of our identities at least partially resolved, we turned to the more complex matter of explaining Eleanor's return to the community. After much discussion, Alexander suggested a narrative that, while not the complete truth, contained enough elements of reality to be sustainable. Eleanor Lawson, the twin sister of Eleanor Mitchell, had been hospitalized after a severe accident at the same time her sister died. Upon recovery, she had learned of her twin's death and come to Harborview to connect with her sister's life and community. Twins would explain the identical appearance, Alexander pointed out, and while it's still unusual, it's far more acceptable to most people's understanding of reality than quantum resonance and interdimensional travel. Catherine agreed to support this narrative, amending her own story to acknowledge twins rather than a single daughter. The official documentation would be managed through Alexander's considerable resources and connections. And Lily, I asked, how do we explain her relationship to Eleanor? I have a suggestion about that, Eleanor said, her expression softening as it always did when Lily was mentioned. But first, I'd like to meet her, if you're comfortable with that. The meeting between Lily and Eleanor took place in our home, my home, though it had once been hers. I prepared Lily carefully, explaining that Eleanor was not a ghost or a replacement, but a person who shared a special connection with us, a connection that transcended ordinary understanding. Like how I'm not from this reality originally, but I belong here now, Lily asked, displaying the remarkable adaptability of childhood. Exactly like that, I agreed. Eleanor belongs here too, just in a different way than before. When Eleanor arrived, her nervousness was evident in the tightness around her eyes, the careful way she held herself. Lily, by contrast, approached the situation with open curiosity, studying this woman who wore her mother's face with the same analytical focus I often saw when she encountered a new and complex concept. "You look just like Mom," she said after a moment of silent observation, "but different, too." Eleanor considered this seriously. "Your eyes, they've seen different things, and your hair is longer, and you stand more," she demonstrated, straightening her posture in a perfect mimicry of Eleanor's more formal bearing. "You're very observant," Eleanor said with genuine admiration. "Your mother must be very proud of you." "She is," confirmed. "Are you going to live here with us now?" The directness of the question caught Eleanor off guard. She glanced at me, unsure how to respond. "Eleanor will be living in Harborview," I explained to Lily, "but not in this house. She'll have her own place." "But we'll see each other often, I hope," Eleanor added, "if that's okay with you and your mom." Lily nodded, apparently satisfied with this arrangement. "Will you paint with me sometime? Mom says you're a real artist, not just a designer like her." And so began a new chapter in our extraordinary story, one where two Eleanor Mitchells, now distinguished as Eleanor Mitchell and Eleanor Lawson, carved out space for themselves in a reality that, by all laws of physics and probability, should not have been able to accommodate both.
Eleanor Lawson moved into a small cottage on the north side of town, overlooking the same harbor but from a different angle than the home I continued to share with Lily. She resumed her painting career, her work evolving to incorporate themes of captivity, freedom, and the fluidity of identity, abstracts that captured her experiences without revealing their true nature to casual observers. I continued my graphic design business, though increasingly I found myself drawn to painting as well, the skills and passion that had belonged to Eleanor now accessible to me through our shared memories and the quantum integration process. We developed different styles, her work bolder, more abstract and emotionally raw, mine more structured, combining elements of design with traditional painting techniques. Catherine embraced her unexpected situation with remarkable adaptability, developing distinct relationships with each of us. With Eleanor Lawson, she shared the deep bond of their original mother-daughter connection, enhanced now by the profound relief of reunion after presumed loss. With me, she maintained the warm relationship we had built during my 6 months in Harborview, a connection that increasingly took on the quality of friendship between equals rather than a maternal bond. And Lily, remarkable, adaptable Lily, formed her own unique relationship with Eleanor Lawson. What began as occasional painting sessions evolved into a genuine mentorship, with Eleanor nurturing Lily's natural artistic talent in ways I hadn't been equipped to do before the quantum integration process. They would spend hours in Eleanor's studio, experimenting with colors and techniques, Lily absorbing knowledge from this woman who was and wasn't a version of her mother. "She sees differently than you do," Lily explained to me one evening after returning from Eleanor's studio. "You both look at the same thing, but you notice different parts of it. It's like having 2 different maps of the same place." Her insight struck me as profound. Eleanor and I were, in the most fundamental sense, the same person, same genetic makeup, same early life experiences, same inherent tendencies and capabilities. Yet we had diverged through our different life paths, different choices, different experiences. Now, reunited in a single timeline, we offered complementary perspectives rather than redundant ones. This revelation led to an unexpected development in our professional lives. 3 months after Eleanor's rescue from the research facility, we decided to combine our talents in a joint creative venture, a studio called Quantum Perspectives that offered both graphic design services and fine art. The name was our private acknowledgement of the extraordinary circumstances that had brought us together, though clients simply assumed it was a clever marketing concept. The studio quickly gained a reputation for innovative work that bridged commercial and fine art, exhibition catalogs that were themselves works of art, corporate commissions that transcended typical office decor, illustrated children's books that appealed to adults as much to their intended audience. Eleanor's artistic vision, combined with my design sensibility, created something neither of us could have produced individually. As we worked together, the strangeness of our situation gradually gave way to a comfortable familiarity. We developed shorthand communications, inside jokes, the easy rhythm of collaboration between people who understood each other's thought processes intimately. We were neither fully separate individuals nor merely versions of the same person, but something unprecedented, quantum duplicates who had found a way to coexist constructively rather than canceling each other out. "You've created a new paradigm," Alexander told us 6 months after Eleanor's return as we celebrated the success of our first joint gallery show. "According to everything we understood about quantum physics, 2 identical entities from different timelines shouldn't be able to coexist stably in a single reality. Yet here you are, not just surviving, but thriving." "Perhaps we're not as identical as the theory assumes," Eleanor suggested. "Even before our separate experiences diverged our paths, we were always individuals with free will, capable of making different choices in different circumstances. Or perhaps the quantum anchoring process was more effective than we anticipated, creating sufficient differentiation in your quantum signatures to allow stable coexistence. Or maybe," I added, watching Lily across the gallery as she proudly showed Catherine a small painting Eleanor had helped her create, a universe is more flexible than our theories allow for, more accepting of anomalies and exceptions. The question of how our situation had defied theoretical quantum constraints remained unresolved, but the practical reality of our coexistence became increasingly stable and accepted within the community. The narrative of identical twins, one presumed dead, then the other appearing in Harborview, raised eyebrows initially, but was gradually accepted as one of those strange but true stories that happen in real life. Only a small circle knew the complete truth: Alexander, Catherine, Lily, and a few trusted allies who had helped secure Eleanor's freedom and establish her new identity. To the rest of Harborview, we were simply the Mitchell-Lawson twins, artists with an unusual close bond who had found their way back to each other after tragedy and separation. But the shadow of the research facility in Vermont remained. Alexander had been analyzing the data we'd recovered, uncovering evidence of a government program far more extensive than we had initially believed, one dedicated not just to studying quantum anomalies like Eleanor, but to actively manipulate them for potential military and intelligence applications. They called it Project Janus, he explained one evening as Eleanor, Catherine, and I gathered in his study, after the Roman god of transitions, doorways, and duality. Its goal was to develop methods for controlled travel between parallel timelines, initially for information gathering, but ultimately for more direct intervention. Like what happened to me, Eleanor said quietly. Exactly. You were one of several subjects with natural quantum resonance properties who were being studied, but you were unique in the strength of your dimensional signature, which is why they focused so intensely on you after your death was staged.
And now, I asked, do they know she escaped? Are they looking for her? Alexander's expression grew grim. Almost certainly, the facility has been completely abandoned, cleared out within days of our extraction mission. But an operation of this scale and significance wouldn't simply be terminated because of one security breach. They've likely relocated, continued their work elsewhere. With other subjects, Eleanor said, the implications clear in her voice. Other people like me, being held and experimented on against their will. We sat with this knowledge in somber silence. The relief joy of Eleanor's rescue, of our successful adaptation to coexistence, was tempered by the awareness that others remained captive, their freedom and dignity sacrificed to a program operating beyond legal or ethical oversight. We need to expose them, Catherine said suddenly, her voice firm with conviction. Not just for those still being held, but to ensure they never come after Eleanor again. It's not that simple, Alexander cautioned. This is a classified government program with powerful protection. Any direct attempt to expose it would likely be suppressed, and those involved would be targeted. Then we do it indirectly, I suggested, an idea forming, through our art. Eleanor looked at me sharply, understanding immediately. A conceptual exhibition, quantum theory, parallel realities, the ethics of cross-dimensional research, not explicitly about Project Janus, but raising the questions, planting the seeds. Art as activism, I agreed, creating a context where these ideas enter public consciousness, where the right people start asking the right questions. It's still dangerous, Alexander warned. If they connect the exhibition to Eleanor's escape, to their research, then we're careful, Eleanor said. We create plausible deniability, frame everything as theoretical, as artistic exploration of quantum concepts, but we include enough specific details, enough resonant truth that those who need to understand will recognize what we're really saying. The idea evolved over the following months into an ambitious multimedia exhibition titled Quantum Reflections, Exploring Parallel Existences. Eleanor and I collaborated on every aspect from concept to execution, creating installations that combined visual art, interactive elements, and carefully crafted text, exploring the philosophical and ethical implications of quantum theory. Central to the exhibition was a series of paired paintings, identical scenes rendered by each of us in our distinctive styles, presented side by side as parallel interpretations of a single reality. The paintings contained subtle references to Project Janus,
embedded in symbolism that would appear merely artistic to casual viewers, but might trigger recognition in those familiar with the research. Another installation featured a room divided by a semi-transparent scrim, with identical furniture arrangements on either side, but subtle differences in lighting, color, and orientation, a physical representation of parallel realities that visitors could walk through and experience. Hidden within this installation were audio recordings of testimonials we had crafted based on Eleanor's experiences and the data we had recovered, presented as fictional accounts but containing essential truths about forced dimensional transfer and its effects on consciousness. Alexander used his connections to secure a prestigious venue in Boston for the exhibition, ensuring it would be seen by influential figures in science, art, and government. Catherine leveraged her own network, broader than I had realized, to generate interest among journalists and academics who might grasp the deeper implications of what we were presenting. As the opening night approached, our excitement was tempered by anxiety. We were walking a dangerous line, seeking to expose truth without explicitly revealing it, to raise awareness without directly accusing those responsible, to protect ourselves while advocating for others still captive. "Are we doing the right thing?" I asked Eleanor the night before the exhibition opening as we made final adjustments to the installation. "Putting ourselves at risk this way?" She stood back from the painting she'd been adjusting, studying it with a critical eye before answering. "If not us, then who? We have a unique position, knowledge of what's happening, evidence to support it, and a medium through which to communicate it without seeming to do so directly." She turned to me, her expression resolute. "I spent 2 years as their subject. I can't walk away knowing others are still there." I nodded, understanding completely. Despite our different experiences, our moral compass remained aligned, another commonality that transcended our divergent paths. The exhibition opening exceeded our expectations. Critics praised its innovative approach to quantum concepts, its aesthetic sophistication, and its provocative questioning of reality and perception. More importantly, it attracted precisely the audience we had hoped for: scientists whose work touched on quantum theory, journalists specializing in science and government oversight, officials whose positions gave them access to classified programs like Project Janus. We circulated through the crowd carefully, noting reactions, engaging in conversations that skirted the edges of what we really knew. Alexander did the same, his years of experience in navigating complex social and political waters evident in how he steered discussions towards the ethical questions raised by theoretical quantum research. One interaction particularly stood out. A gray-haired woman in a conservative suit approached Eleanor as she was explaining one of her paintings to a small group. She waited until the others moved on, and then spoke quietly.
"The Janus reference in the corner of this canvas, that's very specific knowledge for an artistic interpretation." Eleanor maintained her composure, though I could see the tension in her shoulders from across the room. I find mythology particularly resonant when exploring scientific concepts. The two-faced god looking both forward and backward seems an apt metaphor for quantum potentiality. The woman studied Eleanor's face with uncomfortable intensity. Indeed, though some mythological explorations are best left theoretical rather than practical. "Art allows us to explore dangerous territories safely," Eleanor replied, "to ask questions we might not otherwise have the courage to voice." The woman nodded slightly. Questions are valuable. Answers, however, can be destabilizing. She handed Eleanor a business card. "If you find your exploration raising more questions than you anticipated, perhaps we could continue this conversation in a different setting." When the woman moved away, I crossed to Eleanor's side. "Who was that?" Eleanor showed me the card. It bore only a name, Dr. Helen Marr, and a phone number. No organization, no title. "I think," Eleanor said very quietly, "we may have just met someone from Project Janus, or perhaps someone who oversees it. A warning? Maybe, or possibly an overture." She slipped the card into her pocket. "Either way, we've accomplished what we set out to do. We've made them aware that knowledge of their work exists outside their controlled environment. The exhibition ran for 6 weeks, generating substantial media coverage and scholarly discussion. As we had intended, most of the attention focused on the artistic and philosophical aspects of the work, but we noted with satisfaction several articles in scientific journals and policy publications that raised questions about the ethical boundaries of classified quantum research, questions that echoed our carefully embedded concerns about Project Janus. During this period, Eleanor received 3 more business cards from different individuals, all presented with similar oblique references to the specificity of her quantum knowledge, all offering potential conversations in other settings. She kept the cards but didn't call the numbers, understanding that these were likely representatives of the very program we were subtly exposing, attempting to assess how much we knew and how we had come by that knowledge. "They're trying to determine if we're a threat," Alexander said when we discussed these approaches, "whether we need to be contained or merely monitored." "And their conclusion?" I asked. "I think our strategy is working. By presenting everything as artistic interpretation, as theoretical exploration, we've created sufficient ambiguity to make direct action against us problematic. They can't silence us without confirming what we're suggesting." This assessment proved accurate. In the months following the exhibition, we experienced no direct threats or interference. Instead, we noticed subtle signs of surveillance, occasional unfamiliar vehicles in Harborview, new patrons at our studio whose questions seemed designed to probe our knowledge, unusual patterns of interest in our online presence. But alongside these concerning indicators came positive developments. Through Alexander's contacts, we learned that internal reviews had been initiated within certain government agencies, examining the oversight protocols for classified research involving human subjects. Academic papers began appearing that discussed the theoretical ethics of cross-dimensional research, creating a framework for questioning programs like Project Janus without directly acknowledging their existence. Most significantly, approximately 8 months after our exhibition, a heavily redacted report was leaked to several major newspapers, revealing that a classified research program involving alternative quantum states had been suspended pending review for potential ethical violations. The report contained no names, no specific locations, but the description matched what we knew of Project Janus. "It's not a complete victory," Alexander cautioned when he shared this news. "These programs have a way of going dormant temporarily, then resurfacing under new names, new management. But it's a disruption, at minimum, a chance for scrutiny that might otherwise never have happened." For Eleanor, this represented a profound form of justice, not complete, not perfect, but meaningful nonetheless. When the woman moved away, Eleanor said when we discussed the leaked report, "It means my 2 years weren't for nothing," she said when we discussed the leaked report. "If even one person has been freed from what I experienced, it was worth everything we risked." As our 2nd year of coexistence in Harborview approached, the extraordinary nature of our situation had evolved into something approaching normal. Quantum Perspectives had become a successful business, our joint artistic ventures continued to generate interest and acclaim, and the community had fully accepted the narrative of the Mitchell-Lawson twins reunited after tragedy.
Lily, now 11 and entering middle school, had flourished in the unique family structure we had created. She moved easily between my home and Eleanor's cottage, absorbing different perspectives and skills from each of us, while maintaining a clear understanding that I was her mother in the most fundamental sense, regardless of the quantum complexities of her origin. "I was thinking," she said one afternoon as the 3 of us, Eleanor, Lily, and I, walked along the harbor after a successful school art show where her painting had won first prize. "Since Eleanor is like another version of you, Mom, she's kind of like my mom too, right? Like quantumly speaking?" I glanced at Eleanor, who had stopped walking, her expression a complex mixture of emotion. This was a question we had never explicitly addressed, though the bond between them had grown increasingly maternal in nature over the past 18 months. "In a quantum sense, yes," I said carefully.
Eleanor and I share the same fundamental identity, though our experiences have made us distinct individuals. Lily nodded, processing this with her characteristic thoughtfulness. So, could I call her mom too? Not instead of you, but like, in addition? Or would that be too weird? Eleanor's eyes met mine over Lily's head, a silent question passing between us. In that moment, I felt no jealousy, no territorial instinct, only gratitude that this child, this miraculous manifestation of quantum possibility, had enough love to embrace both versions of her mother. I don't think it would be weird at all, I said softly, if that's what feels right to you, and if Eleanor's comfortable with it. I would be honored, Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion, more than I can express. Lily beamed, taking each of our hands in hers as we continued our walk. Cool, so now I have two moms. That's even better than having quantum parents, I think. Her simple acceptance of our extraordinary situation reminded me yet again of the remarkable adaptability of children, their ability to embrace complexity and possibility without the rigid constraints of conventional understanding that limit most adults. That evening, as Lily slept and Eleanor and I sat on the porch of my house, our house in a sense that had evolved beyond questions of original ownership, I found myself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought us to this point. Do you ever wonder about the timeline you came from? Asked, seemingly reading my thoughts. Whether it still exists, whether another version of you is living there without Lily? Sometimes, I admitted. The quantum integration process blurred many of those memories, but I still have a sense of that reality. My marriage to David, my life in Boston, it feels distant now, like a book I read long ago, rather than a life I actually lived. And Lily, do you think she exists in other timelines as well? Other versions of her with other versions of us? I considered this, watching the harbor lights reflect on the gentle evening waves. I believe she might, not necessarily in the same form or circumstances, but the potential that manifested as Lily here, I think that exists across many realities. The quantum resonance that connected us, that brought me here with her, suggests patterns that transcend individual timelines. Eleanor nodded, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. A quantum family spanning multiple dimensions of reality, not exactly what either of us expected from life. No, I agreed, returning her smile, but better in many ways, richer, more profound. We sat in comfortable silence, two versions of the same woman who had defied the laws of physics and probability to create something unprecedented, not just coexistence, but collaboration, partnership, family. The future remained uncertain in many respects. The shadow of Project Janus had receded but not disappeared entirely. Our unique quantum signatures still registered on Alexander's specialized equipment, confirming our ongoing stability in this timeline, but also reminding us of our fundamental difference from those around us. Yet that uncertainty no longer felt threatening. We had faced the impossible and found a path forward. We had turned quantum anomaly into quantum opportunity. We had created a life that honored both our shared identity and our distinct experiences. As the stars emerged above Harborview, I thought about Lily's painting that had won the prize at her school art show, a striking composition showing two nearly identical women standing back to back, their shared shadow forming the silhouette of a child between them. She had titled it Quantum Family, her young mind grasping intuitively what scientists and philosophers might spend lifetimes trying to articulate. In the end, perhaps that was the most profound lesson of our extraordinary journey, that reality, like identity, is not fixed but fluid, not singular but multiple, not limited to what we can explain, but expansive enough to encompass what we can only imagine. And within that expansive reality, even the most impossible connections can become not just possible, but perfect in their own unique way.
If you've ever experienced that strange sense of connection to a life you haven't lived, déjà vu that feels too specific to be coincidence, dreams of places you've never been that feel like memories, an inexplicable bond with a stranger that defies rational explanation, you're not alone. These moments might be glimpses across the quantum barriers that separate parallel realities, echoes of other versions of yourself living different lives with different choices. Subscribe to Other Life Unfolded now and turn on notifications to join our community of reality questioners and possibility explorers. Every week, I share stories of ordinary people who discovered extraordinary truths about themselves and the multiverse we inhabit, truths that changed their understanding of identity, reality, and connection. Whether you're fascinated by quantum physics, drawn to stories of unexpected family bonds, or simply open to the possibility that reality is more complex and beautiful than we've been taught to believe, there's a place for you in our community. Remember, the boundaries between possible and impossible are more permeable than we think. Sometimes the most profound truths emerge when we dare to question what we believe is fixed and unchangeable. Your own quantum story may be waiting just beyond the edge of conventional understanding.